With that, we will enter into our line of questioning. Madame Dancho, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us again today. Last week, yourself and the Prime Minister announced a $2.3 billion subsidy, taxpayer-funded subsidy for Canadians to purchase electric vehicles. As you know, the subsidy is available to American-made electric cars, which personally we found quite shocking given what the Americans are trying to do to our auto sector. You're well aware 5,000 jobs have been lost, countless others. Can you explain the rationale of allowing taxpayer-funded subsidies up to $2.3 billion to go towards the purchase of American-made electric vehicles?
So a couple of things. I think on the auto strategy, the objectives are clear. There are two of them. First is to support auto production in Canada, which I think we all agree here. And the second is really to make sure that we help the industry to get to a place where the rest of the industry in the world is, which is basically electrification. Because we know by 2039, 40% of all the cars sold in the world will be EVs. And while the Americans are taking their own decisions, we will be at the forefront of this industry and we won't just stay idle. So to your point, I was really, I wanted to make sure that we're supporting auto production
Minister,
in Canada.
if I may step in, again, the point is that you've created a subsidy program, a very generous one, $2.3 billion. It's a significant taxpayer investment for electric vehicles. Why did you not disallow the American vehicle market to have access to that? It is odd to me that given what they're doing to our auto sector market, that our tax dollars, everyone at this table and the auto sector workers who've lost their job, those taxpayer dollars can go towards subsidizing the American market. So you mentioned we should be helping all auto sectors. I don't agree that we should be helping the American auto sector. I'm not sure why you do. So
first and foremost, everybody, the industry, Premier Ford, unions, consumer groups are all in favor of the strategy. Why? Because they get the fact that actually we're supporting those who invest in us. Because what is important in your question, and which the Conservatives have unfortunately not alluded to, is the fact we have countermeasures on counter tariffs on U.S.-made vehicles.
And we appreciate
but
that.
The reality is,
I appreciate that,
I'm
Minister.
sorry, I just want to make sure that I finish.
I just want to finish
my
20 seconds, and then Madame Dancho, I've paused
problem.
it for the duration of
So we have countermeasures. And when the American automakers reduce their production in Canada, well, we reduce their market access. We just did that with Stellantis. 50% of the cars they used to send to Canada now are if they're sent, they have tariffs. And same for GM, which is at 24.2% less of market access. So when you look at it, the incentives are linked to the fact that it is to support domestic production in Canada.
Okay, thanks, Minister.
And there is one, possibly two vehicles that are manufactured in Canada that are eligible for this subsidy. The last time your government brought forward a similar EV subsidy, 99% of it went to foreign auto sectors to buy their electric vehicles. So we can assume a similar situation will happen with this EV subsidy you've announced today. Again, I'm not quite sure why you would design a program where Canadian taxpayer dollars could go towards the benefit of the American auto sector. Again, can you explain why that's ethical in the situation that we're in today with the job losses, which is their explicit goal in the Trump administration?
Well, I think obviously the U.S. tariffs are creating this, and unfortunately, I think the Conservatives have been long to denounce the tariffs against the auto sector. You even have a colleague from North Oshawa North, that went and freelanced in last week, and until he was reminded that he was representing GM and GM auto workers were being impacted by the tariffs, he was saying nothing about it. But that being said, if we put that apart, I think what is important is we are all about affordability. We want to make sure that people will have access to cheap EVs, that they can basically embrace electrification, and that we can have more auto production in Canada that are EVs, but also that people can actually have access to buy cheaper EVs, which is what Canadians are looking for.
And so that leaves very little option for Canadians. There are a number of options in the U.S. that are within the subsidy rules as you've established them. So again, I think we're quite shocked that you've created a program where Canadian taxpayer dollars will benefit the American auto sector. It's quite simple. Do you agree that that is ethical, given what they're doing to our auto sector?
Well, because the reality is we have auto manufacturers from the U.S. here in Canada. We have GM in Oshawa. We do. We have also Stellantis in Windsor. We also have Ford in Oakville. So we want to make sure that we keep their footprint. unless the Conservatives are
saying that it's
against
a
the
negotiation
footprint of
strategy?
these jobs, which are
Are you saying that-
around 10,000
Colleagues,
jobs.
just vous deux, just a moment, just one moment, please.
Both of you, please. I have a number of MPs who are telling me there's a problem with the interpretation because two people are speaking at once.
Madame Dancho, when I have found the minister's answer to go a little bit longer, I've got 1 minute 40 remaining. So as I mentioned at the outset, this is about fairness. We want quality answers. Minister, I'll afford you about 20 seconds to respond to that, Madame Dancho. I'll then go back to you. And again, if I see there's a lack of equality, I'll pause the clock in order to afford you that time that remains. Minister, if you want to take
Yeah,
about
and
20
I
seconds.
think her colleague, Mrs. Borelli from Windsor, would agree that the jobs also at Stellantis are important now that there's 3 shifts. So we need to make sure that we support auto workers here in Canada, including those working for U.S. companies. But at the same time, we need to make sure that GM and Stellantis would have reduced their auto production in Canada are on the hook. We're going after the money, and we're reducing their market access. This is what we're doing, Mr. President.
But again, you seem to be placing this as this is some sort of negotiating strategy. Again, this is a subsidy that's available to cars exclusively made in the United States.
In Canada.
If they're made in the United States, they're eligible for this subsidy. So that's not employing any Canadians if you're buying an American-made electric vehicle. It just seems very unethical to us that you would design a program. It'd be quite simple to say American vehicles are not eligible for this, given what they're doing to our auto sector. And I'm not quite sure why you're not taking that position. Perhaps you can elaborate.
Yes. So when we say we reduce their market access, we mean that they will be imposed tariffs. And when they will be imposed tariffs, of course, it will be higher than the $50,000 cap for vehicles. So when you say that we're actually subsidizing, no. The reality is we're supporting cars that will
That's
be
not correct,
lower than
Minister.
50,000.
But that's not
and
correct.
obviously this
There
will
are-
have an impact on vehicles coming from the U.S. that are linked to automakers reducing their footprint.
Okay, there's 20 seconds left, Madame Dancho. Make it concise, please. Minister, make your response concise, please, and then we will move on to the next
So you're
question.
going to give me 20 seconds.
I'm giving you 20 seconds, yeah.
Again, this subsidy is accessible to American-made electric vehicles. We feel that that's deeply unethical, given what the American administration is doing. I'm not satisfied with your answers, so I'm going to move the following motion, Mr. Chair. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of no less than 4 meetings on the federal government's electric vehicle policies, including in relation to Chinese EVs, that the committee invite the Minister of Industry to testify for no less than 2 hours alone in relation to the study, and that the committee invite other witnesses selected by each party to testify in relation to the study, that this study take precedent over all other business, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. And now, Mr. Chair, there's been communications with other parties. So I know with some tweaks, I think we can get to a good motion here that we could pass, but I don't want to take away a lot of questioning time from everyone. So if you agree, Mr. Chair, we will allow this to be paused, to resume at the end of the minister's time today, where we resume this discussion in public.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Madame Dancho. So, colleagues, 2 things real quick. The first is this is the identical motion Madame Dancho put on notice on Friday, so no problems in terms of admissibility here. Appreciate the fact that we have the minister and her officials here. We should be taking advantage of that time. So I'm going to look for a quick glance around the room to ensure that you'll allow me to bypass the standing order here to just commit that we will get to this when the minister leaves, and honor that commitment so that we can continue. Pardon me? In public. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Madame O'Rourke, c'est à vous pour 6 minutes.
You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for joining us today and also for the measures set out in Budget 2025.
Productivity study. And in the context of the Defense Industrial Strategy, witness after witness after witness came. And they talked about the importance of the Regional Tariff Initiative. They talked about improving the SHRED program. They talked about the value of the productivity super deduction. So, Minister, I'm wondering if you want to talk about the pieces that are in Budget 2025 that are really critical to pass as quickly as possible to give businesses confidence that these measures are in place for them, particularly as it pertains to agribusiness or manufacturing, trades, training, and retraining. So I just want to hand it over to you to talk about how urgent it is to pass the budget so that these businesses can have access to these critical supports.
Well, Thank you, dear colleague. Thank you, Dominique. A couple of things. Mais je réponds en français. Hein?
Well, I'll answer in French. I think, first of all, it goes without saying that in the Budget Implementation Act, everything tied to the strategic fund is important because this fund allows us to assist companies affected by, of course, tariffs, but also it allows us to invest in companies that want to expand in Canada. So we always said, and I presented my plan as Minister of Industry a few weeks ago, we need to protect jobs, but we also need to create jobs. So this fund is very important for that. Everything tied to tax credits, of course, and research and development. For too long, SMEs have been paying the cost of a heavy bureaucracy, and they were waiting too long before having access to their funding, which meant sometimes that they had liquidity issues, which was very frustrating, particularly when they are businesses that are growing and need to keep investing and need to be seeking out leading technologies. And that's why we invested more in a new approach for these tax credits, and that's why it's so important to pass the BIA. Those are just two examples. I could give 50 others. Is it logical, Madam Minister, that the opposition is voting against a budget that will help workers with training, will help industry with funding, that will help bail out some of the most affected industries in terms of the tariffs? Do you understand the logic, the why?
All right, guys, I don't enjoy listening to these liberals at all. We're going to just skip over the block, and the liberals will get right into Kyle Seebeck. He's always interested.
One of the issues when we look at these batteries is investment in EVs, is that obviously the battery recycling, and that's why lithium is such an important company. Thank you. I have 4 seconds left, so I'll stop there. I'll recycle it into your next question, Mr. Saint-Marie.
Come back to industry. The floor will be yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I know that you've announced your new strategy for automotive, and I know you think it's going to work to create investment in Canada and create new production of vehicles. And I honestly hope you're right, because we need that help. What I want to actually ask you about is giving EV subsidies to American-made vehicles. I spent the weekend speaking with unemployed auto workers in my riding who work at the Brampton facility. And when I explained to them that Canadian tax dollars were going to subsidize the purchase of American EVs after their plant closed, it was supposed to build the Jeep Compass. That production went to the United States. And now tax dollars are going to go to subsidize the purchase of American EVs. They were outraged. Because Donald Trump's declared an economic war on our auto sector, and they lost their jobs because of it. What do you have to say to those auto workers who I spoke to on the weekend about subsidizing American EVs?
Well, listen, Kyle, I've met with them months ago. And I've met with the Stellantis workers. Some of them were offered a job at Windsor, which I think is too far away, but to build the Dodge Charger, which will be supported by this new EV incentive. And we can be proud because the Dodge Charger just won the best car in North America at the Detroit Auto Show, which happened to be the place where President Trump was there. So Canadian made EV, and we're very proud of that. I think also, Ontario Auto Mayors just tweeted that we welcome the auto strategy, the rebate program project to support more than 840,000 new EV purchases. It's good news. And the EV market already grown from 3.1% in 2019 to 15.4% in 2024.
With all due respect,
so that's really good news as well.
Minister, I'm going to give you, you're complete? Okay. And Mr. Seebeck, as I did with Madame Dancho, don't worry, I've paused the clock and I'm writing down how much time everyone's getting, so don't worry, we'll get through it. Mr. Seebeck, back to you with 3 minutes left.
with all due respect, Minister, you didn't answer the question. I know it's a difficult one, but could you please try and answer the specific question? which is, what do you say to Canadian auto workers who have lost their job because of Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian autos, and that your government is going to subsidize the purchase of American EVs? I don't want to hear about the auto strategy. I just want to know, what do you say to them? Because they want to know. They asked me to ask this question. What do you say to them that Canadian tax dollars are going to subsidize the purchase of American vehicles?
Well, when I spoke with the auto workers, what they told me is that they really were happy with the auto strategy because it brings predictability to a sector that is under attack by the U.S. administration. And so when I tell them we need to embrace electrification because that's where the rest of the world is going and we will be leapfrogging the American industry, they're saying, yes, I agree. And when I say to them, you know what, in the 80s, when the U.S. auto plants were closing, we decided to bring in the Japanese automakers, and at this point, they're 77% of our production. They're like, yes, I agree. And meanwhile, what I say to them is, we need to make sure that we at least keep the U.S. automakers in Canada, for those who are still here, to make sure that we keep the jobs of your colleagues. And in exchange, we will be able, if they reduce their production, to reduce their market access, and therefore they won't have access to the EV incentives, they say to me, you know what, Minister, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no one that I spoke to this weekend.
I can give you names of those I talked to.
Well, you should update them because I don't think you told them that American EVs would be eligible for this subsidy, because when I told Canadian auto workers, they were outraged. You spoke about the Dodge Charger. Do you know how many Dodge Chargers were sold in Canada last year that would be eligible for this? You probably don't, but I do. It's 600. Okay? So 600 vehicles are going to be eligible in Canada. Did you also hear that Stellantis is discontinuing its production of the Pacifica EV? They've put that statement out. So the vast majority of these subsidies are going to go to foreign countries, including the United States, with a president who's declared war on our auto industry. I don't know how you justify that. You can change it right. You can say, you know what, we made a mistake. American EVs are not eligible until the trade war is over. Why won't you do that?
There's something I don't understand with the Conservatives' point of view on industrial policy linked to the auto sector. Is why are you against electrification? You were against EV mandates, okay, we got rid of them, but we want to make sure that we increase, we want to reduce the GHG emissions and align ourselves more to Europe. But that's
Donald Trump, Canadian taxpayer dollars for vehicles.
It's more ideological than that.
Thank you, Mr. Seaback.
So fundamentally, there's something that I don't understand, because it is about embracing where basically the change is happening in the sector. It is about making sure that we can build the best cars in the world for the world. It is to stop to be a hostage of our geography and be able to export around the world. It is about also addressing the real affordability issue at a time where people want to invest in new and buy new vehicles, but they need a bit of help. So everybody's in favor of auto strategy, including the EV incentives. Only the Conservatives are against it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Seaback. Mr. Baines, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today and for all your hard work during this difficult economic trade war with the U.S. My first
And thank you, Minister, for taking our questions. Minister, you've been in government for a long time. Is it fair to say that you believe that government should be transparent and accountable?
As always, of course.
So as many Canadians are well aware, we're here discussing the Budget Implementation Act. It sounds rather innocuous, but what most Canadians wouldn't be aware of, it's a 600-page omnibus bill. Now, buried on page 300, Part 5, Division 5, Section 208, there's a provision that allows you as minister and other of your ministerial colleagues to exempt any individual, corporation, or organization from being subject to federal laws, with the exception of those that fall under the criminal code. From my understanding, those exemptions don't require parliamentary approval. They can last up to 6 years. and they're being justified using some vague terms like public interest, innovation, and competitiveness. So, Minister, do you believe that your government should be able to selectively suspend laws behind closed doors passed by Parliament?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bardisi, on a point of order.
So I know this that certain parts of the Budget Implementation Act have been sent to this committee. I don't know if those sections have been sent to this committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been relatively flexible in some of the topics of discussion here today, so I'll afford the minister an opportunity to respond. And if it is okay, colleagues, a lot of crosstalk here. Yeah, that's okay. We're almost there. Minister, I'll go to you and provide you an opportunity to speak to this. And I think it's fair game for now, Mr. Bardisi, but I appreciate your bringing the matter to my attention. Madame Joly, to you.
Yes, of course, this government believes in innovation. We believe in cutting red tape, but we also believe in the importance of parliamentary oversight.
So I guess my concern with this provision specifically, and I think the concerns that Canadians would have, is that in Section 208 here, it allows ministers veto power over laws passed by Parliament, basically going all the way back to Confederation, as long as they don't fall within the criminal code. It makes elected representatives less relevant and concentrates more power in the cabinet and with the Prime Minister. And it's not like Canadians don't have reason to be concerned. I mean, we have seen major scandals from your government, from the Liberal government, where political discretion in the past has intersected with powerful corporations. SNC-Lavalin, the We Charity are two obvious examples. Respectfully, Minister, like you were in cabinet at the time, and had these laws been on the book, we would have never even known about any of these conflicts of interest. So can you explain why Canadians should trust that this new exemption power wouldn't just be more exemptions for well-connected Liberal insiders?
First and foremost, we always respect ethical laws. I personally always do, and I will always do so as well. And I think your point is well taken, and I think that is why this committee is studying the BIA. So I think you should make a recommendation, and we'll take that into account. And we believe, as I mentioned, in parliamentary oversight.
So, and just, to make the point so Canadians watching and people at this committee can understand how serious this could be, we have examples here now on the disclosures for the Prime Minister's lobbying, where they're more than double, where he's met with business more than double the amount of times as the previous Prime Minister. And according to the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, 59 people, of which the PM is connected to, have become the heads of Canada's largest corporations. So again, like our concern here, and I think the concern that Canadians would share more broadly, is we need to be confident that exemptions under Section 208 don't simply reflect exemptions for the Prime Minister's friends. So can you commit today that every exemption granted under 208 will be publicly disclosed with full legal justification before doing so?
A couple of things. I think the Prime Minister came into politics having a breadth of experience in the private sector, and also having worked at the Bank of England and Bank of Canada, which is actually very useful to the country at this time where we're dealing with a trade war. And I'm convinced also that the ethics screen are in place and that all laws are being followed, and that there's no tolerance to any form of breach of the screen. Why? Because fundamentally, what we value as a government and actually as an institution is the trust of people. And so I really think that you should make the recommendation, which is important. And of course, we'll take that into account, because I really believe in the work of MPs such as yours. And I really think that we need to make sure that there are strong guardrails to keep the public's trust.
Thank you, Minister. And I can appreciate the business experience. I spent my career in business before getting into Parliament to apply business acumen to the parliamentary process. But, that doesn't mean that us as parliamentarians and you as Minister of the Crown shouldn't be enacting laws that are as narrow as possible to ensure that there's no room for exploitation, conflict of interest, or corruption.
Well, that's exactly why you should come up with recommendation, and we'll make sure that we act in good faith and see what can be done to be able to create some important guardrails. I agree. I agree that we need to find, we need to go fast and take decisions quickly. We need to reduce the red tape. We need to get rid of bureaucratic reflexes that have, been in the public service, sorry, colleagues, for too long. But at the same time, we need to make sure that there's parliamentary oversight. And I think we can square that circle.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, Mr. Ma, you'll conclude the line of questioning with 5 minutes allocated.
Minister, your recent announced auto strategy received great reviews from labor unions, from provincial government, and environmental associations. Everyone appears to be pleased with the direction our government is now going. How will the new announced auto strategy help define the Canadian auto industry strategically in the coming years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that a lot of decisions were taken by the auto sector here, and a lot of it was linked to the IRA, so the Inflation Reduction Act under President Biden. And actually, a lot of decisions were taken in the U.S. linked to that. Now, President Trump decided to take his own decision. That's fine. But for us, what we need to do is to think ahead. Thinking ahead means, how can we be able to continue to build cars that people will want to buy at an affordable price and stay competitive? And how can we keep our footprint here at a time where clearly there's a strong push for U.S. automakers, particularly to leave and go south of the border, while being able to attract new investments? And we know that we will be revising CUSMA, and that's something that we'll be working on. So we came up with different ways. I've talked about enticing auto production in Canada. We do that through the $3 billion Strategic Response Fund for auto. We're doing that through a remission system that basically is to support auto makers in Canada. And when they reduce their footprint, well, we penalize them and we reduce their market access for cars coming from the U.S. And we're doing that also because we believe that companies that will increase their production in Canada should be able to benefit from it. And so we're looking at creating credit system for companies that will be able to produce more to sell to those that are decreasing their footprint. And that is why we will be able to create even much more, anchor the companies that are here and potentially attract more car companies. And we want to use defense procurement also to be able to attract investors either from Korea or Germany.
Great, thank you. So, Minister, colleagues today here have expressed concern about EV subsidies are going to the pockets of Donald Trump and so forth. Can you walk us through how the government is supporting domestic production?
Well, I just mentioned the Strategic Response Fund, the remission framework, and obviously because we're imposing tariffs on U.S.-made cars. And I've just mentioned also the EV tariffs, of course. The EV incentives include the cars that are made in Canada, so they can be even more than 50,000 if they're made in Canada. We will be there to support them. It is for the Dodge Charger right now, but it's also for plug-in hybrids. And we think that the plug-in hybrids, including the RAV4, the new one, and we hope the next Civic and the Lexus will be able to be covered. But we think we can have more. We have a Volkswagen plant, the battery plant right now that is has started construction. We have LG that has also a battery plant. We have two really important battery plants, and we think that they are really important anchors for new investors.
That's great. Minister, just to follow up on that, how has the government helped to expand consumer choices in the recent trade missions?
Well, We have a free trade agreement with Europe. We have a free trade agreement with Asia. We believe that by having a block of countries of middle powers together working on having a free trade zone without tariffs, we can increase choices. But we want to make sure also that automakers that are exporting a lot to Canada are able to produce also in Canada. That's definitely our goal, and we'll work with them to attract more investment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, colleagues, that brings us to the end of the first hour. Madame la Ministre, merci beaucoup d'être ici.
Madam Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
Minister, we will now begin with 6 minutes from Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, officials. Thank you for your attendance. And as usual, Minister, thank you for your frankness by slowly opening up that door to a broader discussion on justice issues. I didn't want to turn this into another detailed examination of C9 and C16, but there may be some tangential questions that I may be asking you on 16 issues. But I want to focus on one particular key area, and you talked about the broader issue regarding community safety. And one of the concerns that I have had for a number of years is the erosion of public trust in the federal institutions that we have here in Ottawa, but more importantly, a lack of trust in our criminal justice system. A lot of victims don't see it as a justice system, but rather a legal system. And one of the issues at play is obviously the Jordan timelines and the consequences that flow, and the rising number of sex assaults that have been stayed over the last 10 years. So that's as a broader area that I wanted you to focus in on. But let's focus in on judicial vacancies, because part of the problem, again, is just a lack of resources, whether they be vacancies at the federal level or vacancies with respect to administrative positions at the province. I think it's an opportunity for both feds and provinces to work together to ensure we have a responsive, functioning criminal justice system. But on the issue of vacancies, 2023, we reached a high of 92, meaning over 10% of federal judges' chairs across Canada sat empty, blocking the justice process across the country. Former Justice Minister Arif Virani said he would fill vacancies and kept pushing all the way to get to 100%. To his credit, he did make substantial improvements in that numbers, in fact, dropping, I believe, that number of 92 to the mid to high teens. However, that was 2 years ago, and right now we're seeing another rise in judicial vacancies. So given that every year since the Liberals took office in 2015, would you agree with me, sir, that there have been hundreds and hundreds of applications per year for every judicial vacancy right across this country?
Madam Chair, how long do I have to answer? Is there a custom that we reflect the length of the question and the answer? Okay. Yeah, I'll try to be brief, but Larry, just out of respect to your question, there's a few different elements I'd like to answer. So first of all, I agree with you that public trust is an issue within the justice system that we need to manage. The different bills we put forward try to address this specifically, even going so far as to looking at the tertiary ground to deny bail by changing the test, which is specifically on the public confidence in the system, by considering both the number and the seriousness of the offenses. You're right to point out trust, particularly for victims of sexual assault, who sometimes need to tell and retell their story to people who may or may not believe them. Part of that story could be judicial vacancies. And I think that we needed to do a better job than was taking place on the pace if you go back to the timeline which you began. The pace that we are now dealing with, as we've reduced that number, is more or less keeping up with the pace that judges are coming in at. Last update I got was there was 37 at the beginning of this month. We may on any given day have half a dozen that could be filled in a batch, and you may have 2 or 3 that retire or take their leave from the bench. In addition to that particular piece, we need to look at other systemic challenges, not just filling judicial vacancies, but the timeline that it takes to actually adduce evidence in a sexual assault trial, whether there are enough provincial crowns where the bulk of this criminal, as you would know very well, criminal prosecutions are going to take place, whether there's enough resources in the system. So it would be a mistake to identify any one factor is contributing to overall delays, but we want to address those both by taking off the table the systemic delays in the long term by funding the system, putting judges in place, et cetera, but also directly attacking the consequence of the Jordan decision by revamping the way that the rules operate. In the time I've been allotted, I'll cut my answer there.
Yeah, so you're quite correct. Thank you for that response. As of February the 1st, there were 37 vacancies at the federal level. 2 years ago, 2024, vacancies were at 39. So we are at basically 2. Have you appointed only 2 judicial appointments since you were appointed Justice Minister?
I can assure you I have appointed significantly more than 2, and that's a factor of judges who are stepping down from the bench. Some may retire. One has left to serve in government.
Okay.
There's many reasons why that number can fluctuate week to week.
So I'd like to go back to my earlier question that would you agree with me that for every given position that's vacant across this country, that there are generally hundreds of applicants that make application for those positions? The judicial vacancy or advisory committee then pares that down and then makes recommendations to you. So can you answer the question that there are generally hundreds of applicants that are making application for vacancies every single year and have been so since the Liberals took power in 2015?
I wouldn't necessarily agree that there's hundreds for each vacancy that come up. I don't have the specific number only because the number that gets filtered to me is the number that have been recommended or highly recommended through the Judicial Advisory Committee process. Typically speaking, when we're contemplating making one of maybe 2 or 3 vacant appointments for vacancies that may be available, we'll be looking at somewhere between 4, 6, maybe 8 names that have come through the process. It's not the same number each time.
Thank you, Minister.
But I've not
Thank
seen
you.
hundreds
We'll have to conclude it
of
there.
names
We're going
myself.
to continue with Mr. Fadriskatos for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you to the Minister and officials for being here. Minister, at the outset you mentioned changes that are being brought into force as a result of reforms you want to introduce on vacancies in Ontario and with respect to the unified family courts. Could you expand on what exactly will be achieved as a result?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Frederick, of words. He's on including or just prevent violence.
It's not automatic. Well, I have to manage patients. Why don't you can give me projects? The minister.
I didn't come here. We want to build this country, grow the economy, and take on big projects that meet the moment that Canada is living through at this moment in our history.
Thank you, Minister. Merci, Monsieur Garon. We will continue now with Mr. Lawton for 5 minutes.
Let's go.
Thank you, Minister. Bill C-15 gives federal cabinet ministers license to exempt individuals or corporations from basically any federal law except for the criminal code for up to 6 years. Is that a power you want?
I don't agree with your characterization, and certainly in terms of the. Were you asking if I want to exempt people from the criminal code?
No, do you want the power as a minister that C-15 gives all ministers to exempt individuals or corporations from federal laws excepting the criminal code?
You're talking about the regulatory sandbox? Yeah, okay. So I think regulatory sandboxes are a good idea and will allow Canada to catch up with most of the industrialized world, to ensure that we have the ability to keep pace with changes to technologies, to ensure that our industries don't fall behind in Canada. What I see is not a blanket ability to say the laws don't apply to some people. For a time-limited purpose, for a specific reason, we might be able to test a new technology that doesn't comply with existing laws because the laws were written at a time the technology didn't exist. In circumstances such as those, it creates an opportunity for the innovation economy to create good-paying jobs in Canada by having new tech be tested out, outside of the rubric that was imagined before the technology existed, so we can actually bring new ideas, new technology into the Canadian economy. And the fact that this is rolled out in most industrialized nations, or many, I should say, industrialized nations, I think is a sign that it's not the dire circumstance that its critics would believe it to be.
But why not narrow in scope that authority? Instead, it's basically every federal statute and regulation and every cabinet minister, and it would give you the right to exempt someone from a statute under your file, even if that has nothing to do with innovation and technology and AI.
So, look, it's an interesting question. My own sense is that there are some protections baked into the bill. And look, again, outside of my own portfolio area, but do my best to answer your question.
It applies to all cabinet ministers. That's why I'm asking you.
Sure. So, the fact that it has to be done in public, the fact that it's for a limited period of time and has to be for an explicit purpose. Oh, I'm talking too fast. My apologies, Madam Chair. Give me some faith that there is public oversight of how that authorities will be used. But my response to you, Mr. Lawton, is that this is exactly the kind of thing that committees such as this should dig into, to the extent that there are recommendations that through witness testimony that the department or the minister hears from or members of the committee find to be compelling. This is the forum where we put ideas on the table that can be adjusted through the parliamentary process. I'm a huge believer in the value of Parliament, and if this committee collectively thinks it can add value by better creating a regime around a regulatory sandbox, what an appropriate function for parliamentarians to play.
You mentioned to Mr. Brock earlier, or sorry, it was to Mr. Fragascatos, the importance of bail reform to most parliamentarians elected, and I am grateful that your party has come around to this. Let me just ask you, though, about priorities. There was a case I came across this morning from Durham where 6 men were charged with trying to buy sex from children, and they were released on an undertaking. Again, another one of these cases that we see where most Canadians would look and say, why are these people not behind bars? We as a committee moved very quickly when we were finally able to do it on the Justice Committee to push C-14 forward. Right now, we are still facing a question. We've asked to your colleagues there, why can we not prioritize Bill C-16, which deals with intimate partner violence? So why has at every stage C-9 been more of a priority than these issues that by your own admission there is far more consensus on, such as bail and sentencing reform?
So the answer as to why one bill would have been put forward as a priority depends on at what point in the cycle you'd be referring to. The reason that we introduced the Combating Hate Act first of the 3 major crime bills going through the House right now was that it was ready earliest. It is a far simpler bill in terms of what it actually seeks to do compared to the sweeping reforms included on bail and sentencing or in gender-based violence or in protecting kids online or in the real world. So early in the fall sitting of Parliament, we move forward most quickly with that particular bill.
But simplicity does not mean it's unanimously supported. And so why not move on issues where there is consensus and a far greater need when you have all parties ready and willing to do that?
So we don't only do things in government that has unanimous support. We do the things that we campaigned on, that Canadians voted for, including the Combating Hate Act. But the bail and sentencing reform is also very important. We were able to accelerate
I have 5 seconds left, Minister. I'd stipulate you did not campaign on removing long-standing religious speech protections from the criminal code.
Through consultation with concerned parties, we landed on a version of the bill that we thought best served their interests and continue those conversations today.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Lawton. We will continue now with Mr. MacDonald for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister and officials. Minister Fraser, I think you and I have spoke several times about sextortion since I was elected, and just want to go over what Bill C-16, we see in Pillar 2 of C-16, it proposes significant amendments to strengthen Canada's response to child sexual exploitation, both online and offline.
We're going to
It's restoring the mandatory minimum penalties and introducing new penalties related to sextortion and a new offense for recruiting youth under 18 into criminal activity.
Provision of an act of parliament sweeping powers for
say that it down that road of questioning, and the one that Mr. Lawton had as well about this specific provision, because your government's once again asking for sweeping powers for any minister or the Prime Minister to exempt any entity or company from any law or regulation in Canada with the exemption of the criminal code. just a yes or no, does this include the Conflict of Interest Act?
I have a hard time seeing how that would apply in an innovation context.
It's a simple question, though.
Well, it's not as simple as you make it out to be. It's like if there's a circumstance you're trying to get at, maybe you could provide clarity or color around.
The provision itself says exempt any entity from the application of a provision of an Act of Parliament. Is the Conflict of Interest Act not an Act of Parliament?
Sure. I'm trying now to think of the manner in which that would be a person would be exempted from.
It's a straight yes or no. Would the Conflict of Interest Act, could it be exempt by a minister of the Crown under this new provision?
I've not dug into the specific issue, but you're uniquely dealing with an area that applies to people who benefit from parliamentary privilege, who you would exempt from certain kinds of acts. It's just a more complicated question the minute you start thinking about it than you give it credit for.
I think it's pretty clear from here that it would exempt, a company could be exempt from the Conflict of Interest Act if the Prime Minister or a minister were to deem so.
But in what innovation context? I'm just, not to even disagree, but just to understand your question.
Okay, let's put it into an example then. Let's say a company like Brookfield, which obviously has conflicts with the Prime Minister, is going to be getting a contract, or a minister is looking into whether to approve a contract for them or not. Could they be exempt from the Conflict of Interest Act by a minister after this is passed?
Under the way you've described it, I'm not certain that's how it would operate. I think on balance, though, if there are things that you think need to be corrected that could be improved, the integrity of the act to be strengthened, this is a great forum to make amendments. But let's
Minister,
not lose sight of the
concerning
forest for the trees, because we're going to lose out from an economic point of view when all of our competitor economies are playing in this space if we choose not to.
You have to understand why we are bringing these concerns forward. It's been reported even in the Toronto Star. Many Canadians are very concerned about this because it's sweeping powers that you're giving. And I'll give you another example, because it's concerning also that you don't know whether that would fall under the Conflict of Interest Act or not. And you should, I would imagine you would, that you're the Justice Minister and Attorney General. And in one way, you're also legal counsel for the Cabinet. But here's another example. If a minister has a conflict with, let's say, a Chinese state-owned company who's also looking to get an approval for a research, grant or approval in Canada, would they be also exempt from the Conflict of Interest Act with this provision?
So I find it uniquely unhelpful to assess in the hypothetical the range of possible different things to come out without the specific facts.
These are things that could happen, correct, after this provision is passed. That's why I'm putting these examples in front of you.
Yeah, it's just
and it's concerning that you're not answering any of these questions.
Well, I'm seeking to. You may not like my answer, but I'm seeking to engage in good faith in this conversation right now. And if you think that there is a way that you can protect the integrity and the manner in which these authorities would be used,
should that not have been thought of before this was put in the BIA itself?
Well, I think the protections that were put in the BIA do protect against the harm that you're concerned with. Mr. Allen, if you'd like me to answer the question, I'm trying, but it's hard when you speak over me in order to do it. The protections that were included in the bill, they do exist. There's time limit. You have to specify the purpose. It has to be done in public. Those are very real protections. The piece where I'm struggling with your question, sorry, what's that?
None of those provisions, but they include the Conflict of Interest Act.
So the challenge that I'm envisioning with how a person would use it in the context of the Conflict of Interest Act
the only person that could use it is a minister or prime minister, correct?
This would be limited. The authorities contemplated are certainly for members of cabinet, yes.
Exactly. So it would apply to someone like yourself. So if a company like Brookfield, who obviously has conflicts with the prime minister, was to apply for a grant, they could be granted a conflict of interest under this provision, correct?
So I wouldn't scope out, there's better protections in my mind to prevent conflicts, and we all comply with them. We all have certain ethical requirements as a result of the code.
But this is outside of that. You're asking for these powers. This isn't something that's currently here right now. That's why we're concerned. That's why I'm asking these questions to you.
So if you do
Sorry,
have...
Minister, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Halan. We'll continue with Mr. Sawatsky now for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming. Minister. Appreciate all of the work you've been doing. I know it's very welcome.
The number.
It's from Ms. Thomas. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Bill C-11, of course, as mentioned in your opening remarks, it was sold as not regulating user content. However, the CRTC has recently confirmed that it can, in fact, require algorithms to manipulate what Canadians see online, which ultimately would boil down to censorship if that were the case. It's exactly what Conservatives have warned about. It's exactly what Canadians have been very much concerned by. And so I'm just curious as to what you make of this then, now that the CRTC is willing to admit that they can, in fact, compel algorithms.
Well, this is first and foremost, Ms. Thomas, an issue when it comes to the ongoing work that the CRTC is doing in making sure that we are properly regulating platforms and specifically what the CRTC is currently seized with, which is making sure that people are providing Canadian content. This isn't about free speech. It isn't about telling people what to do. It's about making sure that we have a thriving broadcasting and a modern broadcasting system in a country like Canada, geographically situated, and making sure that we survive in a country that gets a lot from American culture.
So algorithms can, in fact, then result in speech censorship. What do you make of that? If algorithms are compelled, it means that people will be able to see certain content and not other content. That means certain content can be put into, some abyss somewhere where folks cannot access it, or they can post it, but then it'll automatically be hidden because of an algorithm. That's censorship. It's keeping some people from being able to say what they would like to say online, and it's keeping others from being able to see what they would like to be able to see or listen to online.
I think you and I think indeed this committee have seen what algorithms can do, and if they are manipulated, how the effect of that manipulation can have on the availability of content. I don't think there's any suggestion that the CRTC is going to suppress algorithms or suppress speech by making sure people are behaving responsibly. Are you suggesting otherwise?
By the CRTC's own omission, they are saying that they do have the ability...
you said omission or admission.
By their own admission, sorry, thank you. They are saying that they have the ability to compel certain algorithms to be...
the CRTC is a regulatory agency. It has to live up to the standards of their own constituent
And in order to
charters.
achieve the outcomes of Bill C-11, it would then be incumbent upon the CRTC to compel certain algorithms to be enacted.
I think you're reading a lot more into that than what the CRTC is actually doing, which is
Are you able then to
responsible
assure Canadians here
regulator.
today that that will not in fact be the case, that algorithms will not be compelled, that outcomes will not be instituted?
Are you suggesting that any platform can use any algorithm to push its own narrative and content into the Canadian public?
Minister,
and that should be
I'm
unregulated.
just asking for assurance for the Canadian
Well,
people.
I'm asking
if you can in fact assure them that algorithms will not be mandated in such a way that it would control certain things from appearing online and others mandated to appear online.
What I can assure Canadians is that the CRTC can and is expected to do its job, which is to make sure we have a properly regulated
Which
broadcast
they are saying
environment.
that they have the ability to compel algorithms. So, Minister, what you are effectively saying then is that you stand behind that.
I think we agree to disagree on that.
With all due respect, I think that is exactly what you just admitted to. Minister, Bill C-11 came into effect in June of 2024. It's been almost 2 years. What tangible accomplishment has been achieved through Bill C-11 for the Canadian people? It was touted as something that would further our identity and our culture. I'm just curious as to what tangible things it's done to do that.
I think by its passage, it has signaled to the industry, it's signaled to Canadians that we are expecting people to behave in a free and open society as they should, and to build up and to make sure we are building a society that allows, in this environment, the media to thrive justly, as you highlighted, supporting freedom of expression, but in an environment that is fair and accessible to all.
And you would say that that outcome has been achieved?
I don't think we're entirely there, no.
What part of that outcome has been achieved?
I think we passed a law that was very important to make sure that people are doing their jobs and in some cases paying their fair share.
Okay, but in fact, Bill C-11 is caught up in the courts.
Yes.
And
People
actually,
are allowed to sue in Canada.
Absolutely. And actually really hasn't gone forward in any way. But there's been a whole lot of money spent by the CRTC on Bill C-11 and building a regulatory framework. And so is that really the best use of Canadian dollars when nothing has been accomplished for nearly 2 years?
Well, I certainly wouldn't reduce funds to the justice system simply because people are suing, which is their right. I think.
I'm not asking for money to be reduced to the justice system, Minister. Don't put words in my mouth, please.
No, I didn't. I didn't hear a question from you.
So right now, Canadians are struggling more than ever with affordability. And the changes that were brought in with Bill C-11 and with Bill C-18, the Online News Act, it has increased the cost of subscriptions.
Thank you, Ms.
It
Thomas.
will
That
likely
concludes
further
time
increase
for
the cost
this
going down
round.
the
We're
road.
going
What
to
do you make of
continue
that?
now. Ms. Thomas, that concludes your time. Thank you. Mr. Létard, on va continuer avec vous pour 6 minutes. Merci.
We're going to skip to the next round.
No, to help that, I was support communities. There is a decision. CBC industry. We have the file that I'm responsible.
Is an integral part of Canadian culture and identity.
Absolutely.
So you obviously know where this is going. On October 30th, when you were the chair of the Justice Committee, you spoke about how there is, quote, clear hatred in some verses of the Bible and Torah, and that prosecutors should be able to have the discretion to lay charges if someone invokes a particular scripture that you find objectionable. So how are you standing up for the various diverse communities, faith communities in particular, that you extolled in your opening statement, when you believe that sincerely held religious beliefs should attract prosecution?
I believe anyone should be able to freely read the Bible, Torah, Quran, or any religious scripture. It's a guarantee in the Charter that I will defend as well as you will.
Unless it's a verse that you don't like.
What I said, and you were there, no, I'm glad to answer that. Ken.
Mr. McDonald?
This has nothing to do with the budget or the BIA Act. He's line of question.
Thank you.
It stems from comments made in his opening statement, Madam Chair.
Excuse me. Yeah, I didn't recognize you, Mr. Lawton. Mr. McDonald, it's not a point of order. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawton. You can continue to have the floor, but I would ask that you be recognized before you take it. Thank you.
I think that I don't think religious scripture should be used as a defense for a hate crime. If someone publicly says that they want to kill all the gays and that they are relying on a passage in Leviticus, they should be prosecuted. Hard stop. And I'm a Christian. I believe firmly that that person should be prosecuted.
And that would not be a good faith usage of Scripture.
That's your debate, but sometimes prosecutors may be prevented from laying charges because there's some hesitation. I think it needs to be clear in the law, and I think you would agree with it, and any reasonable person would as well.
You mentioned back in December, I think if you talk to people of faith and even religious leaders, they would see that this is really something that makes sense regarding removing those religious speech protections from the criminal code. I have spoken to people of faith and religious leaders, and Bill C-9 and the removal of the religious defense has been denounced by the Primate of the Anglican Church of Canada, the United Church of Canada, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the Rabbinical Council of Toronto, the Conference of Canadian Catholic Bishops, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. Why do you believe that you know more than these faith groups about religious freedom and protections for religion in Canada?
As a Protestant, I rely on my relationship with Jesus and my reading of the Bible. I believe ministers can be guides. So I think I stand on an equal footing. I think you would agree with me with that. But if you really want to protect religious institutions, you will talk to Pierre, Parliament's only temporary foreign worker, and have him pass C-9 to protect religious institutions.
Your government has signaled that the Online Harms Act, which has been twice tabled and twice not passed, will be returning. This is a bill that, among other things, would, in its previous incarnations, reinstitute Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which allows for human rights code, the Human Rights Code, to go after what the government deems online hate speech. Will that be a part of the forthcoming Online Harms Act?
Look, if you want my opinion on it.
Well, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking for your insight as the minister.
Well, I'm not going to speak about deliberations that are in front of cabinet. If you want my opinion, there are issues in and around freedom of expression about any act that would be presented into Parliament to keep Canadians and particularly children safe from online harms. And I don't think it's necessary to have a private recourse regime under the Canadian Human Rights Act.
We have a bill that's before this House of Commons already from Michelle Rempel-Garner, I believe C-216. I might be wrong about the number, but it creates a duty of care for tech companies to deal with very legitimate online harms against children, against sexual victims. Why not support that?
I'm not unsupportive of it, frankly. I spoke to your colleague, Ms. Thomas, recently about that. I haven't yet, in fairness, to speak to Ms. Rempel about it. I think the motive behind it and the purpose behind it is laudable. I think in the articulation of it, it properly should be introduced by the government and supported by one, but willing to work with her on the details.
Will the forthcoming Online Harms Act be a bill that you put forward, or will it be a justice bill?
It's TBD.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. We will now continue with Mr. MacDonald for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister. Other witnesses. Minister Miller, Prince Edward Island's cultural identity is deeply rooted in its Acadian heritage. And place
to have shows that are relevant to the public. You could probably debate about it, but I just think it makes sense. There could be, but also the CBC does a pretty good job of it, and why wouldn't it do?
Do you believe CBC's role should be to fill gaps that otherwise no one else would fill, or is it to, do something, even if it means competing with private players in the market?
I think definitely it's a lot of the former and perhaps some of the latter. We talked with my colleague Ken MacDonald about getting into remote regions. I think CBC has a duty to get that information into more remote regions where it isn't economically viable to do so. So absolutely. Maintaining the vitality of our official languages, especially in Francophone communities outside Quebec, is key, given the state of the language in those communities.
I don't know if the Tomato spoke about colonialism in both official languages or not.
Maybe not, but I'm sure it did a great job of it.
Okay. I yield to Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Minister, on those lines, your government has committed another $150 million to the CBC. There was already $1.4 billion that was committed. This is at a time when Canadians are struggling with affordability. They are the taxpayer. They are the ones that are ultimately paying for that increase that is going to the CBC. Meanwhile, the CBC viewership is down, trust is down. Canadians just aren't there with you, Minister, and yet they're expected to foot the bill. So I'm curious on their behalf, what accountability measures are being used to determine that this is in fact a wise use of dollars?
Well, I think when you look at the numbers, and the numbers are revealing, Ms. Thomas, the CBC per capita is not as well funded as any comparator country. Only under us are the U.S., and we're pretty close to one other country. So there's general consensus that a robust publicly funded national broadcaster is important to democracies like ours. Do they get everything right? I think certainly the answer is no, but it is important for them to be there to do exactly what they are supposed to do, which is to inform the public, for example, on issues of affordability. So you perhaps, and your party has been quite open about defunding the CBC, but I think that would undermine the trust of Canadians that are relying on information from reliable providers to make those decisions as to who to vote for. And they have been remarkably good at getting that information out, in my
view. If I may, the question was around accountability, but rather than offering any metrics that you as a government are using to determine the success of the CBC and whether or not more money should be spent there, the only thing you've mentioned is comparing to other countries and what they're spending. So you're more interested in keeping up with others, the Joneses, if you will, than you are with holding the broadcaster accountable for actually producing what Canadians rely on. Viewership is down, trust is down. Canadians are not buying into this. But you're insisting that we need to spend more money because other countries are doing it. Why is that your metric? Why are you not holding the CBC
Thank you,
to
Ms.
greater
Thomas.
account?
That concludes the time for this round. We'll continue with Mr. Sawatsky for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister, and to everyone for coming today. And it was so great to see you in British Columbia. Minister, the Fraser Mills sawmill was built on the banks of the Fraser River, and it recruited 100 French Canadians as workers for the area. So these families were founded, the workers themselves founded the French-speaking village of Mayaldeville, which is a part of my riding, and that became one of the largest French-speaking communities west of the Rockies in the 20th century. So today, Mayaldeville is an important historic site for.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure everyone's seen the letter that our leader, Pierre Poilievre, sent to the Finance Minister with respect to the state of the auto industry in Canada on February the 9th. We've seen historic declines in auto manufacturing in Canada from somewhere near 2 million vehicles a year to 1.3 million vehicles a year. We've now seen the closure of facilities and thousands of jobs lost. So we want to talk about some solutions today that Conservatives have for the government with respect to the state of the auto industry in Canada. Number one, we've been consistent in this. They need to take the industrial carbon tax off in Canada. It costs the Canadian steel industry about $500 million a year, and we must be looking at similar numbers for Canadian auto manufacturing, which makes our cars more expensive and more difficult to export around the world. Number two, we have talked about taking the HST off of all Canadian-made vehicles. This in of itself would encourage Canadians to buy those vehicles. It would spur local production and have a great chance of bringing back some of the jobs that we've lost in Canada as a result of the tariffs that Donald Trump has put on our automobiles here in Canada. And talking about the tariffs that Donald Trump has put on our automotive manufacturing here in Canada, can someone please explain to me why, in the face of this trade war, this unjustified trade war that the Americans have put on our auto industry, that we would be giving Canadian tax dollars to subsidize electric vehicles made in the United States? This makes absolutely no sense. So we are calling on the government to not allow a single Canadian taxpayer dollar to subsidize or give a rebate for an electric vehicle that is manufactured in the United States. These are clear, sensible positions that will benefit Canadians and Canadian auto workers. I now want to turn it over to my colleague and friend Arpan Khanna from Oxford, where the Bright Drop factory closed.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Good morning, everyone. And we're joined by our great colleagues who also represent some strong areas for the auto sector. Ontario is home to one of the best auto workers in the world. You know, in Oxford County, we have the Toyota plant. And up until recently, we had our Cami GM plant. These are hardworking, tough, highly skilled workers who were the backbone of our community. And the sad news we heard last year with the plant closing has had a devastating effect in our communities. 1,200 workers were laid off. That's 1,200 families being affected. I often hear stories at the Cami plant of couples working together, multi-generations, working side by side on the assembly line. And there's the ripple effect of tens of thousands of spin-off jobs that are being impacted. So these jobs have a major impact in our community. But just last week, they received some more bad news. As the GM payouts started rolling out, the workers opened up their pay stub to notice that over 50% of their payouts were being withheld for taxes. Now you can imagine, in an affordability crisis like we're seeing today, what kind of impact that would have on their families. These workers have called me and told me that it feels like they're being kicked down while they've already been on the floor. They are now struggling to put food on their tables. They're struggling to pay mortgages, rent, and also plan for their kids' summer sports. So this has had a real impact on our community, and that anxiety is felt right across our region. And that is why our leader, Pierre Poilievre, and my colleague Kyle Seaback, along with other colleagues, are calling on this government to take some action. Our workers need relief right now. They can't wait a year and a half to get some of the money back. They need some help right now. So we're calling on Minister of Finance to pass some measures with a stroke of a pen, help those workers that need help so we could have affordability in the lives of these tremendous workers. We're happy to take any questions you might have.
My question is for any one of you. What have you, has your leader, have your colleagues heard about Mr. Giovanni's trip to Washington?
Well, look, we are all, when we're elected to fight for our constituents and fight hard. That's what we're doing here right now. We're fighting for auto workers. And I have lots of auto workers in my riding that work at the Brampton facility, which has been closed. Mr. Giovanni was down in the United States fighting for his constituents because they have many that work at the Oshawa plant. And that's what we're here to do.
Can we therefore see more of you or your colleagues having meetings with officials in Washington?
We have colleagues going down in Washington all the time. When I had the trade portfolio, I was down in Washington meeting with officials. That's what we're here to do, especially in light of what's going on with the trade war with the United States.
With the withholding tax proposal, can you maybe walk us through why you're proposing it only for GM workers? It sounds like this is a tax that you're going to have to pay eventually, whether it's going to be withheld right now or on tax season. Is it because this belief that there's auto workers might not be in a position to have another job, in the coming weeks or months?
Look, I think the Conservatives have always stood for the rights of workers to make sure that they're protected and they have the support they need to make sure they can live an affordable lifestyle. When I talk to the workers in my riding, I could tell you that they're struggling and they're nervous. So for us, we want to make sure that the support is there. They can't wait a year and a half for that money to come back. We all see the numbers with food inflation at record numbers, 6.2%, double that of the U.S. So to make life affordable for these workers and other workers, we're open to making sure that other workers enjoy the same benefits that these workers do in GM. It's important we take these steps, and we're willing to work with the government. The government often talks about collaboration. We are calling on the finance minister to work with us, sit down with us, and find those relief we could provide to the workers during these tough times.
You also talk in your letter about the lack of strategy from the federal government when it comes to autos. One thing we've heard from this government, though, is using our defense investments as a way to leverage, bringing in different automakers, potentially from South Korea and Germany. What do you make of this effort from the government?
What we so often see from this government is vague MOUs that might lead to something someday. And that's great. But what we actually, the plan that we've proposed, what we've just said, are things that would actually increase domestic production right away, not wait for some promise with another country that may get an auto manufacturer to come to Canada someday that may produce some vehicles. We think the better path forward is what I laid out earlier.
It's not just auto workers who have been affected by the trade war. We're seeing a lot of forestry workers have lost their jobs as well. They've been laid off as well. Federal government has touted endlessly things like the job sharing arrangement that they believe will be able to prevent some of these layoffs. What is the disconnect here? Because it's clearly not working, because we're seeing workers get their layoff notices. What is the disconnect between government policy right now and what's happening?
The disconnect is the complete and utter failure of the government to get an agreement on any of the issues that we have with the United States. The softwood lumber dispute has been going on for somewhere close to 9 years now with absolutely no action. In fact, it gets worse every single time. The countervailing and anti-dumping duties go up. The job losses and the mill closures accelerate. Meanwhile, it's not even on the agenda. For our forestry workers, they must think this government has completely abandoned them. It's never even discussed by the Mark Carney government. And on the other tariffs on auto, again, we have to remember, Mark Carney promised to have a deal with the United States by, I think it was July 21st. We're now 8-10 months past that, and things are only getting worse. Which brings me back to the question, and I want everyone to think about this. When they're tariffing our vehicles to the point where we're having 5,000 auto workers lose their job, 2 plants that now have laid off all their workers, they're going to give rebates to American-made EVs. It's a kick in the teeth to auto workers. I spent the weekend talking to them. So their strategy on every level is not working, and we can't fix that. their incompetent strategy. What we can do is suggest ideas that will make a difference, and that's what my colleague and I are doing today.
Je me permettre en français, M. Paulus. J'aimerais vous entendre d'une part sur les
Each, Mr. McCauley, you'll lead off first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, A.G. Hogan and everyone else for the commentary. I want to start, Madam Beaujeu, who writes the copy of the public accounts? By the copy, I mean almost the editorial and the explanation. Not the numbers, but who writes out copy?
Thank you for the question. Are you talking about the financial statement discussion and analysis?
Volume 1,
FSDNA?
Volume 2, Volume 3. I can pick something at random. Transfer payment, a transfer money from a government, et cetera, et cetera. Who is writing that? The reason I ask is, if I'm looking at it, the public accounts, and I appreciate it's received a clean audit, but if I'm reading at it, it looks like there are Liberal government talking points in the public accounts. I don't believe these should be in the public accounts. I'll give you an example. Page 8, Section 1. The government is moving toward a new capital budgeting approach that distinguishes its day-to-day operational spending from expenditures that stimulates public and private sector capital formation. Like, these are talking points right out of the Prime Minister's office, and this is for after this year's public accounts. So it doesn't affect the 2024-2025 public accounts. So why are Liberal talking points put in last year's public accounts, and who wrote it and who approved it?
Thank you for the question. I mean, the financial statement discussion analysis is a product of the Department of Finance. So we try to find an appropriate balance between representing
Okay, let me stop you right there, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
These changes that have been widely discredited, I think, by the PBO and others, are for the current fiscal year, not the previous year. So why are Liberal talking points in last year's public accounts, which are supposed to be nonpartisan, public accounting signed off by the AG, why is it in last year's public accounts?
Thank you for the question.
I'll be blunt here. Is it appropriate? And AG Hogan, do you think it's appropriate?
Well, perhaps I'll start and then I'll let
Just briefly, 'cause I
Mr.
don't have a lot of
Leswick go.
time.
The audit opinion, which starts on page 59 in the English version of the 2025 public accounts, covers the financial statements which follow. When it comes to the financial statement discussion and analysis, we don't opine on that. We are associated with it, so we make sure that it's not misleading. But part of the responsibility of a government in that document, the financial statement discussion and analysis, is to talk about the future and to talk about risks and how they're managed.
Do you think it's appropriate, Mr. Leswick, these specific comments?
I certainly take your points there.
Stimulating public and private sector capital formation?
It was trying to provide some sort of, as Ms. Hogan said, directional framing for...
Page 9, Section 1, it continues, elimination of the consumer carbon tax on the fuel products further contributed to lower inflation, which of course was denied for years by the government. But again, this is for discussion of the 2025-2026, it was eliminated. Didn't affect the inflation issue in 2024-2025 that the public accounts covers. Again, it looks to me that it was added in as a PR stunt to promote the current government, because it has nothing to do with the 2024-2025 year.
So do you want me to respond?
Yeah, like, am I wrong here? Like, I haven't seen this in past public accounts. I've never seen previous public accounts where it's commenting on future inflation being changed because of...
Yeah, I certainly take your point, and we'll be very mindful of that going forward.
Okay. The carbon, I want to get back to, again, the carbon tax. It talks about the providing small and medium-sized companies their money back. How much is still there to be paid out? Because it had been promised for years it would be paid out. The public accounts comments on the huge majority of it being paid out, but then it talks further about it's going to be paid out over years. So when will it be paid out? Do you know?
That's a Question. I don't have the remaining balance available to me, but we can follow up with you directly or with the committee with that answer.
Okay. I want to talk about the liabilities portion. When it talks about contingent liabilities, it's jumped from $2 trillion to $3 trillion. And I realize what contingent means. Madam Beaudreau or Mr. Leswick, like what has changed that there's a $1 trillion jump in our contingent liabilities? Is that the chill or the ruling around Richmond with the land claim there, or?
Thank you for the question. I don't think we have a 1 trillion increases in contingent liabilities. What I remember, it is going from 56 billion to 54 billion, but there is no $1 trillion increase in contingent liabilities.
I'll find the exact thing. I think it's jumped from, when it talks about contingent, like possible, there's, based on the potential risk of the payout.
Mm-hmm.
It's in there. I'll find it exactly for you. And I actually only have 13 seconds left, so I'll have the page number when we come back.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley.
Which is for 6 minutes. First up, we have Mr. Menegakis for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before us today and for your testimonies. I'd like to start with you, Mr. Paolosini. May Trin, who's an entrepreneur, was recently on BNN and noted that tech startups are leaving Canada in favor of doing business in the United States. In fact, she said Canada is like a really good-looking guy you want to date, but for some reason he makes it really difficult for you to be with him. Do you believe the immigration system today enables entrepreneurs to stay in Canada and build businesses?
I don't think it does at all. In my opening remarks, I mentioned a friend of mine, Mustafa. Like I mentioned, he has raised $1 million in private investor capital. He's doing operations in 3 different countries. He's got memorandums of understanding signed, and he's going to have to wait 84 years to get his PR. And yes, he's in Canada right now on an open work permit, but the challenge is the uncertainty for these applicants. We've got, like I said, 500 spots for startup visa applicants, and how it got so out of hand with 43,000 in backlog, according to the minister's transition binder, I just don't understand how that happened. I just don't understand, like they were asleep at the switch or something.
Thank you. You've also published letters to the minister regarding processing timelines and inconsistency. How would you characterize the current state of the IRCC?
A bit like a lottery, a little bit random. You never really know what you're going to get. Certainly not fair, no transparency, and very limited accountability. That is my statement on the current state of IRCC.
You've also advocated for a sustainable immigration policy. Do you believe the current Liberal immigration policy over the past few years has been sustainable?
No. Particularly in reference to the I will say that the reduction in the temporary resident numbers has actually been effective, cutting out the, let's say, the student fraud, the international student fraud, and the public-private partnerships with DLIs. But what was concerning was the one-time measure in the budget, where they didn't put the number for protected persons, but they put the number for students and economic class because, well, it's a much smaller number of 33,000 TR to PR. And when you look through the 2024 and 2025 stakeholder consultations and the consultations on express entry, it is obvious what Canadians want. They want to focus on skills. They want to focus on economic class, immigration. And I believe that's why they left it out of the budget.
So just for the record, in your view, has the current government's rapid increase in immigration targets outpaced the actual growth of our housing supply and healthcare infrastructure?
I believe the temporary residents did at some point. Like I mentioned, the current government did really reel that in, and they reeled in the LMIA fraud, which I was quite outspoken about over the last couple of years. And in terms of the permanent numbers, I think the numbers right now are relatively sustainable if they go with 380,000 permanent residents per year in the budget, not 455,000 when you include the special one-time measures.
So one of the phenomenons we've seen, certainly in urban areas across the country, definitely in my riding in the greater Toronto area, in New York region, is youth unemployment. You've spoken about the fraudulent labor market impact assessments, LMIAs. Can you expand on the impact this has on youth unemployment?
Of course. What happens is that employers, when they can bring somebody on a closed work permit based on a low wage LMIA, they have basically a modern day wage slave who has to show up for work every single day, or else they're afraid that they're not going to get to realize their dream of remaining in Canada. And for employers that do pay the minimum wage, they find that these workers are better than Canadians who can just, they have an open work permit essentially, right? They can go work at the next shop and they're competitive in the market. So this has definitely contributed to it. And like I said, Service Canada has really cracked down on it. So
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your responses. Mr. Baruchiski, you have described the current state of immigration as possibly the country's worst public policy failure in a century. Can you elaborate on how the Liberal government's failure specifically destabilized Canada's ability to provide housing and health care?
Well, I don't know if I can help on specifically housing and health care, but in general, there are large numbers. We were just talking about permanent residents, and we were going up towards 500,000. But that's only a small part of the picture. And the way that happened from right after the pandemic period, there's a huge explosion in various categories of temporary residents. We were never really even told about that. We couldn't plan for that. Okay. And when I'm saying 2-3 times more than the permanent residents. So it doesn't make sense to talk about immigration in Canada by focusing just on permanent residents. Just that little simple point, but it has huge implications because we're talking about many more immigrants, temporary residents.
Now, you've also argued that letting in so many people into the labor market and low-skilled jobs have actually lowered GDP. So, similar question: how does this touch upon youth unemployment?
20 seconds.
Right. Well, what happens if you're bringing a lot of temporary residents, students who then are working, so they're taking the kinds of jobs I would want to have if I'm 16, 17, 18. I'd want to work in a fast food restaurant as I did. I'd want to do these things. And if your competition is a lot of people from poorer countries, that's a discussion paper from the Bank of Canada was telling us, poorer countries bring certain kinds, lots of younger people, they're studying, but they're not really studying.
Thank you, Professor Baruchiski, and thank you, Mr. Menegakis.
Starting with Mr. Small for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to welcome our witnesses today. My first question is to Ms. Street. Ms. Street, did the government need to sign on to the United Nations 30 by 30 Marine Protected Areas scheme in order, to protect Canadian waters when more than a dozen acts of Parliament are in place to protect fish stocks and our ocean ecosystems? Was agreeing to 30 by 30 necessary, do you feel?
We don't feel it was necessary. We feel, it was a very extreme target. And unfortunately, it has been the fishing industry that's borne the brunt of what we've seen, our goalposts that are constantly moving. We heard 10, then we heard 15, and that was 20, and that was 30. And our question is, when does it stop? Again, we don't feel like the fishing industry is being treated fairly in this. And had we all gotten to the table, there are pristine areas, say in the Arctic, in Northern Labrador, that everybody was willing to work together that could help meet those targets and not affect our industry negatively. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is just a complete, I call it a disrespect for our industry. I mean, we just a little while ago had the Virgin Rocks come across our desk as a potential closure, and our members are up in arms. I mean, it's one of the most lucrative historical fishing grounds when it comes to northern cod, which of course is on the rebound and is becoming much more important to our members as a species that they will harvest. I
want to stop you right there, Ms. Street. When did you find out about the Virgin Rocks Marine Protected Area? Would you have been one of the first groups that would have been approached for your support in the developing of that, since you're such a user a user that depends on that area so much.
Yeah, we're not quite sure where we were in the hierarchy of folks that were informed, but I do remember our industry liaison, Katie Power, who deals with closed areas on the forefront, coming to me late fall last year and saying, look, I think this is going to be a major issue. And we were absolutely floored when we saw that the Virgin Rocks were even in consideration.
Thank you. So I heard you mention pristine areas that could be protected. And, typically when we look at land-based protected areas, historically, we'd be looking at areas where we had old growth forest or whatnot, and areas that were never touched, that were pristine. Do we have areas in the ocean that are pristine and rarely fished that you think could have a priority to be protected over areas that have been, basically some of these areas have been bottom trawled that the bottom is like a parking lot?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously speak to our Indigenous counterparts on a regular basis as well. And I know there were some areas in Northern Labrador that were under consideration, and mostly areas that were never fished, whether by our members or Indigenous groups. And it just seems like those fell by the wayside. Unfortunately, it seems like the target is always on the back of the fishing industry.
Thank you. To Ms. McDonald, so how do you feel about the need for our federal government to sign on to the United Nations 30 by 30 marine protected areas protocol when our oceans are protected by more than a dozen acts of parliament?
So our role is not to comment on the policy. Certainly I've been part of a number of discussions, and there is a global focus on protection. But I think that the conversation globally and the challenge is we can't have the designations outpacing our ability to monitor, enforce, and understand impacts.
Thank you. But along the lines of where Ms. Street and I were just speaking, when we look at land-based protected areas and national parks, historically, when we began with national parks, pristine areas and old growth forests and areas that were never touched by any type of developing or resource harvesting were first to be protected. Do you think that's the way that 30 by 30 could proceed in protecting pristine areas that are not touched already?
That would not be my area of expertise.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Street, oftentimes Canadian NGOs are pushing the narrative for establishing new protected areas, and they're often funded by American foundations to help sway public opinion in favor of creating these protected areas. How do you feel about that?
Well, we've been very public and very clear on our position when it comes to ENGOs, and we're deeply troubled that the Canadian government has them at the table as stakeholders in fishery management decisions when clearly the only stake they hold is padding their own pockets and their own coffers for their donors. I want to stress again that FFAW members believe in conservation. There are no greater stewards of the resource than fish harvesters. It's their livelihood. It's going to be their livelihood for generations. And it's very easy for somebody in an office who's probably never seen saltwater to weigh in and try to shut down somebody else's livelihood when it really doesn't affect them. It's been troubling since the days of their advocacy against the seal hunt. We've seen the devastation that that's caused. And now we see them trying to shut down fisheries, shut down areas, and just absolutely nothing demonstrated that it's going to achieve any of their goals. So we really do question their motives. And again, as you said, Mr. Small, they're catering to American donors, just millionaires who have no stake in the fishing industry. So it is troubling, and we're seeing their involvement grow, and it's something that we are going to continue to push back on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. Next, we're going to go.
In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups: the globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.